How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 259 of Master My Garden podcast. So, this week's episode is one I've been trying to line up for a while and one I'm quite excited about. We're heading into the middle of January here now, and we're all sort of gearing up for a new year in the garden. And this week's guest is somebody that is worth following on YouTube and somebody that's worth keeping an eye on her social pages and also as a article writer in the Irish Garden. So I'm delighted to be joined this week by Rachel Darlington from Gardening at Douentza, and she's going to tell us all about her garden. It's a garden that I suppose has multifacets to it. As we record here, there's monstrous houseplants in the background, and I know her garden is featured on the YouTube channel, and she sort of tells the story and teaches people about what she's doing on any given time. Recently, when we spoke, she was planting a huge amount of bulbs, and we might hear a little bit about those as well. So there's lots going on and a very interesting garden. So Rachel, you're very, very welcome to My Garden podcast.
Thanks so much, John. It's great to actually get to talk to you after trying to organize it for so long. And thank you very much for asking me to come on here.
Yeah, for sure. So loads going on for you. So obviously quite a substantial YouTube channel. You're you're a columnist with the Irish Garden. You've written your own book, A Journey of an Irish Garden, and yeah, as I say, a lot's going on. You seem to be kind of an expert in houseplants as well as everything outside. So tell us a bit about the story of gardening at Douentza.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I have a complete and utter passion for plants. I love so many different groups of plants. The garden is, I suppose, my main focus, and I love working in the garden, especially in spring. I just think there's something wonderful about having all that nature around you. But I also love house plants, and I love orchids, and I have a glass house full of, well, what is in there changes readily over time, but a lot of cactuses and succulents and South African bulbs.
Brilliant.
So that's where I'm coming from, a complete and utter passion for plants. We have many gardeners who I think are more interested in the design side of it. And I've seen you interview some of them on here, amazing gardens like Kilgar Gardens.
Yeah.
I saw your recent podcast and fantastic garden. But I think to have that discipline would be very hard for me, because I just love to have one of this and one of that, and let's see if this one will work. And I don't know if this one is quite hardy, but I'll give it a go. So I guess I would be undisciplined in terms of that, in terms of getting kind of coming at the gardening from a landscaping perspective.
Yeah. Do you think that I would say that that's something that, obviously you've 60,000 subscribers to your YouTube channel. And do you think that approach is for the Joe public listening at home, that approach, that's a more relaxed approach, a less formal approach, do you think that appeals to people?
Well, I think what I tried to do with the YouTube channel was to have like different streams which were of interest to different people. So some people are just interested in cactuses and succulents, and I hope if that's their interest, they'll find enough content on my channel to keep them going. I'd say the majority of people that watch me are interested in outdoor gardening. But yeah, so I think, whatever the mix. And when I originally started the channel, I posted a lot about orchids, which I do less so. But I hope that the people who subscribe to me to look at the orchids have now, I don't know, are now looking at something else on the channel. But that was just kind of the idea behind setting it up, really, just to have a broad range of everything to do with gardening. But in terms kind of being a bit eclectic and a bit of a plant lover, I think everybody has some of that in them. Anyone who's passionate about plants has some of that in them.
Yeah, I reckon so. Funny enough, house plants is probably my weakest area. For some reason, I like the look of them, but I don't particularly have a draw towards them. Any house plants that are in my house, Rebecca looks after them, and yeah, I'm not big into them. I don't know a huge amount about them, but just
Yeah.
thinking of just because you mentioned orchids, we're a
Mhm.
couple of weeks after Christmas now. There's a lot of orchids after being gifted at the Christmas period.
Sure. Yeah.
They were all delivered in flower and in lovely planters and in some different baskets and whatnot. Just a
Mhm.
few kind of basic tips to keep them looking decent.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's many people look on it as the perfect gift for a mammy, or even perhaps for the your wife. Yeah, I mean, the orchids that are generally for sale in the shops at this time of year are moth orchids, so Phalaenopsis, and they're in
Yeah.
flower and they're fantastic. I would say, generally speaking, steer away from the blue ones because
Hmm.
any orchid that has a blue color, it's been dyed. So they've
Yeah.
put some kind of dye in. And okay, if you're happy for it to revert to white after a period of time, then go for the blue. But yeah, so I think Phalaenopsis are really easy to look after. They will tolerate, generally speaking, the temperatures that we have in our houses, but they do need good light. So in winter, I would put a Phalaenopsis orchid on a south facing window. Yes, south, so for maximum light.
Yeah.
But when the sun starts coming up somewhere around February, that orchid is going to burn unless you move it. So at that point in time, you'd need to maybe move it to an east facing window or even a north facing window.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, you just water the orchid whenever it dries out completely. So stick your finger into the medium, and if you can feel that it's dry down to about an inch, then it's time to water. Bring it to the sink. Um, Flush it with warm water. So I just use tap water and just have it at a warm temperature because they don't like shock, very fussy little things. They are so used to having the best of everything. And just pour the water through, letting it come out into the sink. So with orchids, they are in such a free draining mix that the water should just wash straight through. And then make sure that all of the water has come out so that the plant isn't at any time sitting in water. And yeah, I mean, very easy plants, and they should flower for months. They can flower
Yeah.
for months if treated correctly. So, and when it finishes flowering, don't throw it away. Cut off the spent spike with a sterilized scissors. Maybe even just pour some boiling water over the blade of the scissors over the
Yeah.
sink, and then just cut it. And it should resprout then if you take care of it well. I mean, they're
Brilliant.
hybrids.
Yeah, I didn't plan on going there, but seeing as you mentioned orchids and houseplants, and we're just so close after Christmas, I thought it was a good one to pick up on. You mentioned something else there as well, and I only spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. What's your thoughts on sprayed plants generally? I know you mentioned not to go for
Oh, like the heathers and the.
yeah.
I don't know any gardener or plant person who likes that. I mean, do you like it?
No, I absolutely I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, and I think I went on a little bit too much about it, but they really annoy me. I just don't understand why you would feel the need to spray a plant in anything, to
And you
color
know what
it.
else really annoys me? The googly eyes they stick on cactuses, the little like googly eyes. Or else with cactuses, they have like fake flowers on a pin that they stick into the plant, like actually pierce the. And
Oh no,
I
I've
mean,
never seen that now.
have you know? Oh no, lots of places have that now. I mean, you know, immediately like cactus flowers only last a day or so. So if you come back
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
nursery or to the garden center and it's still in flower, there's something not quite right
Right,
there.
yeah, yeah. No, and the sprayed headers, I hadn't seen the cactus, but I'll keep an eye out for them. The little conifers that are completely coated in snow. Well,
Oh
not
yeah, yeah,
snow, some sort of plastic stuff. I just they really irritate me. I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but anyway, I'll have to get over that. Um,
yeah. But I
so,
mean, there are a lot of nice things for sale at this time of
oh,
year
for
as
sure.
well. I mean,
Yeah,
the hippeastrums, the amaryllis bulbs.
yeah.
People can easily get their hands on those, or paper whites, or whatever to grow in the
Yeah, for
house.
sure. There's enough of stuff there, yeah, without spraying. Tell me this, the garden itself is based tell us where it's based and tell us a little bit about the
Yeah.
garden. So if we walk through the front gates or take us on a kind of a virtual journey through the garden and maybe
Okay.
talk about some of the kind of highlights or whatever.
Okay, so the garden is called Douentza, and it's named after, well, we named the house Douentza. It's named after a place in Mali in West Africa, where I spent some time a long time ago. And the garden, it's an acre in a rural setting. So it was a greenfield site when we moved in, I think 24 years ago. It's not a greenfield site anymore, I can tell you that. So, I mean, it's built upon the lines of garden rooms, I guess. So, in different areas in the garden, there are different discrete areas which might have a slightly different look and feel or color scheme from the rest of the garden.
Mhm.
So I do have some sections that are good in winter because they rely on box hedging. Oh yes, and I've had the blight as well. But mostly my garden is herbaceous plants. So I love flowers. And the downside of that is that in winter there's nothing to see because they're all dormant. But when those flowers wake up in spring, are pushing up and then get going in summer, then that's when I just be in the garden and enjoying things. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I guess over the course of 20 odd years, a lot of the trees have really matured because what I find myself doing nowadays is an awful lot of removing branches from trees. So, lifting the skirts of the trees, basically. So,
mhm.
removing the lower branches so that it allows for planting of perennials, etc., in
Yeah.
the lower areas.
And these
And
trees,
yes, so
what's
I mean, I have, pardon?
so these trees now, what trees are you using within the garden and how are you using them? Are they used in kind of hedging format or are they used in specimen type tree or what have you got?
Well, mostly I plant trees in flower beds,
Hmm.
so there would be accent trees in among the flowers.
Yeah.
And I suppose my favorite tree that I use a lot of is the old Tetrapanax rex,
Oh yeah.
which is great because it looks like a tropical tree, but it's hardy for me here in Wexford.
Hmm.
And it has kind of big pinnate leaves with, I mean, you know it, with the like just enormous leaves. So it looks very exciting. And I have small groves of it in various places in the garden. So
Yeah.
that would probably be my favorite tree.
Yeah,
But
and it doesn't block out too much, so you can plant. It lets a lot of light through. It's not a huge canopy.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
brilliant.
Yeah, as much light as possible. I grew a couple of unusual things. So I have Sarracenia, which are North American pitcher plants, so insectivores, ones that eat insects. And I grow these in bog gardens, so raised bog gardens
Hmm.
surrounded basically a plastic pot, a large plastic pot. I mean, really
Yeah.
large, with no drainage holes or very few drainage holes because these are bog plants, so you want to keep the water in. And I've
Hmm.
just put stone around the outside, so it looks like a stone planter, but it's just plastic. And the great thing about the Sarracenia is that they're hardy in most places in Ireland. You can leave them out despite what people think. They die down in winter, and then in spring they flower, and they're so
Wow.
clever because they flower before they make the pitchers. So the pitchers trap the insects, but if they flower before they send up the pitchers because they don't want to eat their pollinators. So yeah, so like I think of three bog planters in various places of the garden.
Brilliant.
And
I'm not familiar with that plant, so
yeah,
so it's
it,
hardy. It's hardy in most places in Ireland.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And great because it flowers, and then you've got the tall pitchers, which would keep going until November. So it looks attractive for a lot of months. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's a good one now. You mentioned books as blight, so you have boxes around framing some beds, is it?
That's right. Yeah. So I have an area of what I call cloud pruning,
Okay.
basically a whole lot of buxus balls planted together.
Yeah.
and they kind of merge into one. And
Okay.
but I have had the box blight, and I've had it twice, and I've dealt with it twice, and I have a video on the YouTube channel as well. If anybody else,
Of
I
how to
hope
do it.
nobody else is facing the same thing, but unfortunately, it is quite prevalent in Ireland at the moment. And
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's funny that when it kind of so it was talked about in Europe for a long number of years, and there wasn't much, or there wasn't hardly any cases of it here, but it did kind of start in the Wexford area, and then spread up along the east coast first. And the same thing has happened in recent years with the box moth, which I think again wasn't in Ireland for a long time and was a big problem in Belgium, Holland, France, but
Mhm.
in the last couple of years, the East Coast particularly has been seeing a lot of it. And I know a couple of gardeners in Cork actually hit quite badly in the last 12 months with it as well. So it has spread over time, but Wexford seems to get it first. The other one was the lily beetle, which again, I think the first kind of sightings of that were in Wexford, and it has since traveled up the country quite a bit.
It's all our fault. Yeah.
I think it's kind of a gateway, is it? And I think I think it's kind of that people like down there, the sunny southeast, there's probably, yeah, and I don't know whether it's anything to do with proximity or what it is, but the first cases of a lot of these seem to be picked up down there first before you hear about them up the country. So it's not sure why, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So how did you get rid of the box blight? I know you have a YouTube video on it, but how did you get rid of it?
Yeah, well, a lot of cutting back and removing as much of the plant as possible, and then spraying with. There's a product called Top Boxes. They
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
sponsor me, but it's a really good product, and it's good because it's not really a chemical so much as a fertilizer.
yeah.
So it encourages kind of healthy growth and new growth in the plant. And yeah, but unfortunately, the pathogen can lie dormant in the soil for up to 5 years.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that's what happened with me the first time. Like I seemed to get rid of it, and then 5 years later, it reoccurred
Yeah.
because it was still in the soil, and then we had a very wet winter, and of course, it favoured it coming
Yeah,
back.
funny enough, if they are growing well and they're not hungry or they haven't suffered any sort of stress, they typically are able to keep it away anyway.
Yeah,
It's only really plants that are kind of struggling a little bit,
struggling. Mm.
or have got some form of a shock or other. If they're really thriving and driving, then they seem to be okay, even if it is about.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think,
Yeah.
and that's the same for so many diseases and pests that will attack plants, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Perennial borders, you said, is your sort of your main passion. So,
Hmm.
and you mentioned at the start that you don't necessarily follow a team, that you like one of this and one of that. So, have you planted in drifts? Have you planted to kind of the normal?
Yeah, I have come towards color coordination, kicking and screaming perhaps, but more so in later years. I love orange and red in the garden. I know a lot of very sophisticated gardeners would favor blue. Not my favorite now. I would be more for the vibrant colors. And just this autumn, I have made a really large new bed in the garden, a big lasagna bed. So I use the
Okay,
lasagna no dig method to make new beds. So I have an enormous new bed to plant up next autumn. I will leave it as is for because it probably needs a year to digest properly.
hmm,
And then next autumn, I will have some planting to do. So I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to go for a red theme or recently I visited the O'Mahony garden down in Limerick and was so taken by a pale pink and white border there that although
right.
that isn't my color preference, I'm kind of thinking, oh, maybe I would love to do something like that. So who knows?
Okay, and the lasagna bed, no dig bed that you're creating. Tell us about what you've done there to start that. You haven't it
All
planted
right.
yet.
Well, the lasagna method is the easiest. method to get a new flower bed going. My daughter is currently starting her garden, but unfortunately she can't avail of it, because what you really need to do the lasagna method effectively is you need to have a lot of other perennials in your garden that you're going to cut back. So basically everything that was on the compost heap, I'm going to use in the lasagna bed. So I marked out the area, put down cardboard over the grass, and then brought everything from the compost heap with a bit of help down and laid it in layers, or I mean, okay, you're supposed to lay it in layers, brown and green, brown and green.
Yeah.
But whenever I've done it before, that is pie in the sky, really, in terms of it's the ideal. But in reality, I just put the compost down. And if I have a bit of earth to put on the very top, that's excellent. I didn't have this time. But what I will do, and then stamp on it, stamp, stamp, stamp. And what I've left it open now all the winter, so the rain is going in, helping it to break down. In spring, when I cut back everything in the garden, it's all going on this enormous, enormous bed. And then for the rest of the season, I will cover it up with plastic, just to stop weed seeds blowing onto it.
Yeah.
And also just to give them, I don't know, I mean, plastic's not a great look in a garden, but if I have guests, I have garden visitors, I can't be showing them a great big open compost heap like in a prime area of the garden. But I can use it, I put the plastic on top, and I'll use it as a learning exercise for people to come and explain what I've done and what I'm doing.
Yeah,
But
yeah, brilliant. And that works really well. And even I don't know if you mow your lawns and collect the grass, but like even throwing the grass clippings directly on top of it is all summer next year will be highly effective. I know I've done that here, and it really helps. Don't put it on huge layers, obviously, but it does work.
right, right,
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
brilliant system.
yeah.
So and then you're going to plant a load of bulbs into that then next autumn. Is that the plan, or is that
Well, no, I'll plant it up with perennials next autumn.
perennials?
So I'll collect the perennials. No doubt some bulbs will go in as well, but I'll collect the perennials over the summer, propagate, and and growing things from seed as well. So hopefully by next autumn, I'll be in a position to have enough plants of whatever type I've gone for to plant up the border.
Yeah, and are
Yeah.
you going to propagate these plants yourself from the garden, or are you going to sow seeds, or are you going to buy, or what's the kind of plan for?
Largely, I hope to largely, because I do like the drifts. I have come more towards drifts in recent years, and like you can't be like well, okay, some people can go out and buy 20 of the same perennial, but most of us will just buy two and divide them
Yeah,
or
yeah.
propagate them to get what we want. Mm,
And
yeah.
and your plant choices for that bed haven't been made yet.
No, I haven't decided yet,
Okay.
but I'm
So
going to have fun deciding.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So elsewhere in the garden, then tell us about some of the perennials that you use, or that your sort of go-to favorites, your something that's performing really well, or what's the kind of theme
Yeah.
there? You mentioned colors, I think oranges and pinks, purples.
Uh, yeah, and reds. I mean, I'm a big fan of Monarda
Yeah,
at the
Monarda.
moment. Monarda, and I've seen in some places like June Blake talks about how she ripped it out in a large area because it was just kind of taking over. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't it great to be in a position where you have to rip out a perfectly beautiful and a plant just because it's doing too well? So I do favour Menarda's. Cambridge Scarlet is the one that does best for me. Alstroemeria, of course, and we all have the Indian summer one, the one with the
Hmm.
dark foliage and the orange flowers. But there are lots of, I mean, even that series with the dark foliage, uh, there are several varieties of it now. So it's not just Indian summer. No, I can't think of the names now,
Yeah, yeah,
but also there are great alstroemerias with green foliage too. So
yeah.
those two would be really strong favourites of mine. Of course, geraniums. Who doesn't love a geranium? And Thompson.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and Thompson's brilliant, and just like it's around so long, but it just really does fit the bill. And if it's draping over something particularly, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's Alismerias, Monardas, geraniums. Anything else
Mm.
there in those beds?
Lilies, I love lilies. I do plant a lot of lilies. I try not to have the easiest lily to grow really is the white one. I
Yeah.
have so many different white ones, like Conquidor is a super one with a yellow throat. But I'm trying now to move away from just having so much white in the garden. Yeah, yeah. And Martigan lilies for earlier on in the season, and pinks and whites as well.
Yeah.
I just find her wonderful. But I usually buy lilies and keep them in pots for a couple of years. And I would have rotating pot displays as most gardeners do. And then after a few years, then I'd plant them out in the somewhere in the borders.
Yeah, brilliant.
And they grow
And
really tall. I have 10-foot lilies in my garden. I don't use the Asiatic type, which like the alkaline soil. I'd prefer the other types who prefer acidic
yeah,
soil because I've got acidic soil, and they tend to grow really tall, like about 10 foot, and usually don't need staking. So
yeah, that's
that's
brilliant.
it's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You mentioned earlier on about garden rooms that you've kind of created garden rooms as such.
Mhm.
Are they themed, or are they kind of repeats of the flowers that you have, the perennials that you mentioned?
Well, I mean, I do my favorite perennials I do use in several garden rooms. Yeah, so I wouldn't just decide I'm not putting a Monarda in this garden room just because
Yeah.
it's everywhere else. I mean, if I think a Monarda will go, it's going into that particular spot. But I've also one thing that I have difficulty doing, and I would love to do, is to just leave space in borders for annuals because annuals are so wonderful, like a cosmos, just a big drift of cosmos. Whenever I create a new border, the first year I'll plant a lot of it up with annuals and they look fantastic. And I'll say, oh, yes, I must remember not to fill that in with perennials. I must leave it for the annuals. And then, of course, you go and you buy the perennials and you've planted them up, and suddenly you've got all these annuals again and you're dotting them in. And I think
Yeah.
they never look as good when they're dotted in among other things as they do when they're just allowed to have free reign and where you can appreciate them fully.
Yeah.
So
Cosmos. I saw the Cosmos this year, and this year was a little bit all over the place. So I was involved with a football team, so I wasn't tending to garden and chores as much as I normally would. So I saw these Cosmos, quite a lot of them, but
yeah.
they got a little bit leggy on me in the springtime. So I chopped them back anyway, and then planted them out when the weather eventually started to get good here, which was late in the year. But anyway, planted them out, and they were doing brilliantly, growing quite strong, and then we got a really bad stormy night, and they kind of all got blown over. But where they cracked over, and literally the stem cracked and touched the ground. But where it touched the ground, it rerouted,
Oh,
and
goodness.
it actually worked out. It was pure accident, but it worked out brilliantly. So the stem, where I planted, grew and put out new shoots, and where it contacted the ground and got broken off, it sent down roots. And so it almost created for want of a
Two for
better
the
word.
price of one.
Yeah, two for the price of one, but it turned out like almost like a hedge of cosmos. And it was
Wow.
really big, and it was a brilliant flower. I can't think of the name of it now, but it was a Thompson and Morgan seed, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And it was slightly by accident, but it's definitely something that I will repeat because it was just a brilliant flower. And
Yeah.
like it's hard to believe the impact you can have from just something as simple as cosmos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you say there is right as well. You need to be disciplined and to like pinch them out.
Yeah.
You get the nice but bushy plants, and then they're less likely to.
Yeah, it was
Um,
just a pure fluke the way it worked out, but it looked phenomenal in the end, to be honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Probably save them in your eyes because maybe you were thinking to yourself, oh, it's not so great. Like we've had a bad year. Maybe it's not a good plant to grow in a bad year. And then
Yeah.
They
No,
say.
to be honest, I was definitely blaming myself because I did neglect them, and um, yeah, they should have been cut back and lots of things like that. But once they got into the ground, they were happy, and then they got knocked over in the storm. They rerouted quickly, so they were phenomenal. So I can't
Mhm.
remember the name of them, but I'll know them when I see them, and it was definitely a Thompson Morgan seed. So yeah, I'll watch out for it again.
Yeah.
So in these garden rooms then, so we kind of started a virtual journey and we deviated off it a little bit. So you mentioned these garden rooms and your trees and your cloud pruning boxes and so on. Is
Mhm.
there any other kind of features that are sort of important in the garden?
Well, I mean, there are various features. There are lots of features. I suppose a big thing would be my glass house, which is at the very kind of back of the garden. And when I um, 15 years, it's 15 years old now, the glass house. And when I put it up originally, I was very determined that the glass house was going to be a thing of beauty because so many of us, we have a greenhouse and it becomes full of like, dirty pots and broken this and that. And, we just shove things in that
Yeah,
we don't know where else to put. And I was absolutely determined I wasn't going to do this. So I planted a large border to the north side of the glass house. And that's fine because the things that the flowers that are in there, they need sun, but they get it through the glass house
yeah,
from the south side. And then in the summer, once the bubble wrap comes down, because I bubble wrap and heat it in winter, so in spring, sorry, when the bubble wrap comes down, then I set it up as a kind of like a show house. So on one side we have shelving with pot plants, and on the other side then there's a permanent border where I've planted in the ground, and I'd have things like cannas and um, like bananas and big plants, and they kind of shade the greenhouse. And when you sit there at the table, then you kind of get a feeling that perhaps you're in somewhere a bit more tropical, a bit more lush. And I love that. That would be
yeah.
my favorite place, I think, in the summer, if it's not too hot, to sit there and just have a cup of tea and just look at the plants in there and feel that I'm in some tropical jungle in Borneo.
Um, you mentioned earlier on about YouTube, and I know that a big passion of what you're doing is trying to educate on your channels. So tell us about the channel, how it started, and I know it's documenting your garden and what's
Mhm.
happening, and when something pops up or you're doing a new project or whatever, that's what you document. So tell us about it and
Yeah.
about the channel.
Sure. So I think I've three main streams on the channel. So the one stream would be anything to do with a greenhouse or house plants or orchids. So that's all kind of lumped in there. And then I have another stream that's to do with outdoor gardening, what I do physically in my own garden. And
Hmm.
then the third stream would be me visiting other people's gardens and doing a tour of them, and if I can get the garden owner to do an interview, that is the best. Absolutely the best. And also in that stream as well, I do a little bit of botanizing. So when I visit other countries, like I was in Borneo earlier on this year and saw amazing things like the Rafflesia, the biggest flower in the world, the big orange stinky one.
Yeah.
And so I make videos about that kind of thing, and yeah, and put it on. So I mean, yes, I mean the reason why I started the YouTube channel and what I really want from the YouTube channel is that it provides information, like good information to people. So like I research subjects before I make a video about it. I
Hmm.
don't want to make a video and just talk off the cuff and
Yeah.
make mistakes and give people wrong information. Um, I won't say I've never done that because I've been doing YouTube for 10 years now. I celebrated the 10-year anniversary there in November. And certainly when I started out, things were all a little more loosey-goosey and kind of finding my way. But now I think I'm at a stage where I've got a decent camera so I can film things well. I've got a decent mic so people can actually hear what I'm saying. And I do research to get good information. And also, I mean, I have access to a lot of great subject matter, so many wonderful gardens in Ireland. And if I can bring people along to see those, then that's wonderful. And then because Douentza, my garden, is like it's an acre, like it's a reasonably sized garden. There's lots to do there, and there's lots of like learning material there. So I hope that people will get value from the channel that way.
Yeah, for sure. And how often do you put out a video? You're going for 10 years, which is quite an achievement. Well done on that. Um, but is it weekly or is it?
It's weekly. It used to be twice a week, but it's weekly now.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
So
I think
soil.
I found if I was putting out more than once a week, then the quality wasn't good, and I prefer to do better quality.
Yeah. Well, one a week is a big commitment anyway, and especially because I was having a look there earlier. A lot of them are quite substantial videos. They're not like a 30-second video, so they're quite long. So there's loads of content there, and I think I'm right in saying there's like 1,500 videos up there at this point, or
Yeah, there's a lot up there now at this stage. Like, I mean, I've covered a lot of subjects over the years. What is absolutely amazing is how much there is to know and learn about
yeah,
gardening. When I speak to non-gardeners and I say, well, I write an article for the Irish Garden magazine once a week, and each time I need to come up with 5 greenhouse-related things.
yeah.
And I've been doing it for over 10 years, so I can't replicate what I've done before. And they say, how is there that much to say? But there is, I mean, there are so many different plants.
Yeah,
We're so lucky. We're really so lucky that we have access to plants from all over the world. And and not that you have to kind of reinvent the wheel with every new plant you get. There's a lot of overlap, but there's always something new to do and new to learn, and that's what it makes it such a wonderful and fantastic hobby.
yeah. Just out of personal interest, and do like you're 10 years now, you haven't really replicated topics. Do you ever find it difficult to come up with new subject matter?
Yeah. Like, well, for the magazine and for YouTube, certainly, especially in winter, like,
Yeah.
because the interest isn't there from viewers or readers, generally speaking, in winter. They're thinking of Christmas and,
Hmm.
like they got their bulbs in the ground, so they're happy about that. And then, they've come in until March. So it's nice if I have perhaps gone somewhere during the year and made some footage somewhere else, and then I can edit that and bring that out in winter.
Yeah.
Maybe tempt people onto YouTube in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, no, because it can be difficult, especially if you're doing it weekly to have new content. It's and to try and not, as you say, not duplicate something you've done before.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was only interested from a personal point of view. You wrote a book as well in the last couple of years, a book which I haven't seen. I actually didn't realize that you had written a book until I was having a look this week ahead of this
Mhm.
interview. So, Journal of an Irish Garden. So, tell us a bit about that.
Um, yeah, well, I've 2 books actually.
Oh, two
So
books.
the Journal of an Irish Garden, it's about gardening, and it's a paperback, like, so it's a physical book, and then I
Hmm.
have an ebook as well. So it basically charts my progress over an 8-year period in becoming a gardener. So when I started off in the beginning, I knew practically nothing about gardening. Like, I don't come from, I don't have horticultural qualifications, and I learned by trial and error. And I think many people don't really come to gardening until suddenly they find that they have one and they realize that, well, actually, I better learn something about this, or else I'm just going to have a mess out there. So that was the case with me, and I very quickly found that I loved it.
Yeah.
So the Journal of an Irish Garden, it's it's very easy read. You can dip in, dip out of it, have it beside your bed, just read a little chapter in the night, and put it down, and you kind of don't have to remember going forward where you were. So yeah, so there's that, and that's available. I think they have copies in the book centre in Wexford town, but mostly you can buy it online from Lulu, Lulu, and also I'm selling autograph copies when visitors come to the garden, and also by post at Christmas time. And then the other, just very briefly, the other is a bit more specialist. I have an e-booklet on growing Cattleya orchids, which is a particular type of fantastic orchid on a windowsill. So I guess quite a specialized thing for those who are interested in that.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, and you mentioned about visitors to your garden. So are you an open garden, open at certain times of the year, or are you open by appointment only?
Well, I'm pleased to say Douentza has just recently been accepted as a partner garden in the RHSI. So I'm
Brilliant.
very pleased about that. I open to groups by appointment mostly, but I do have a few open days
Okay.
during the year, and they'd be published up on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel.
Yeah, something I meant to ask you earlier. When we started lining this up a few weeks ago, you told me to hold off for a week or two because you had a big lot of bulbs to plant. What were the bulbs, and did you get them all
Oh,
in?
I have planted hundreds of bulbs. 4 lots of bulbs.
Right.
So I extended my crocus lawn with 1,500 crocuses.
Well,
Uh, yeah, this autumn. So I had 500 down before. Now it isn't an enormous area, the crocus lawn, but it's an area under trees, which is ideal for naturalizing crocuses.
yeah,
So the weather was bad when I was doing. The weather is always bad when you're planting bulbs. Do you not find, like
always, yeah, always.
you order them because, oh, it's lovely and dry and
Yeah, yeah.
cold, but and then when they arrive, it just buckets down.
Yeah, and that happened
So
this year. The first week in November was lovely and dry, and everyone was getting excited. It was even warm, and yeah, by the second week, everything had turned, and it has been pretty
yeah.
much on the turn since. So sorry,
But I mean,
crocuses anyway.
crocuses, yeah, crocuses. I also planted Dutch irises, a lot of Dutch
Brilliant,
irises, daffodils, which I'm naturalizing in lawn as well, and alliums, various types of alliums.
lovely.
And I think that the thing with bulbs is that when you're doing it, it never seems like it was a good idea. Like it's just like, why did I order these? But once you have them in the ground and once spring comes, it's the best thing you could have done. So like I think any work that you do in your garden in autumn is worth twice as much as
Yeah.
the stuff that you do in March, say. Although of course it's very important to do loads of stuff in March too.
Yeah, yeah. No, but the bulbs is one because, as you say, at that time of the year, you're probably a bit lethargic. The weather is not great. You're sticking in all these bulbs, and you never seem to get to the end of the bucket that you have them in. And yeah,
Yeah,
but but as you said, there's nothing that gives as much for as little effort, to be fair. So
yeah,
stick them in, and especially the naturalizing ones, like they're getting better all the
yeah.
time.
Oh my goodness, John, though the spot I chose to plant the daffodils, it was in theory a really great spot. The orientation was right. It was a spot where I didn't mind having the long grass until the foliage of the daffodils dies down. And I had an auger, an auger that you fit on
Yeah,
the end
yeah.
of the drill. So I thought, like, I'm quids in here. This is going to be no bother. But oh my goodness, when that auger hit the ground, like it was just such a stony spot. I could not get it into the
You should have you should have did your lasagna there now.
Wow, yeah, quite possibly, yeah, and started up at a height. But anyway, I had help. I had somebody helping me at the time as well, great young man, and together we got them in. But mostly just digging with the hori hori. I use a hori hori.
Yeah,
Was easier than when the blooming auger that I'd gone and bought
yeah,
specifically for putting in bulbs.
yeah. The auger would be great
Yeah.
somewhere, but just not for that, you.
Well, I also, yeah. Also, you're supposed to plant them fairly deeply. Look, I covered them. They went in. They got covered by earth.
Yeah,
We'll say no more.
it won't matter. It won't matter, I don't think.
It
So
won't.
tell people where they can, obviously YouTube. So tell people your website or any of your social channels where they'll find you. I know a lot of people come across your articles in the Irish Garden as well. So maybe just direct people to all of those things.
Okay. All right. So, anybody listening, I'd really love if they checked out the YouTube channel. It's called Gardening at Douentza, Douentza. In fact, if you just put Douentza into YouTube, you're going to find me. And like, if you subscribe just by hitting the subscribe button, then you'll get notified whenever I post a new video. So I think very often people can lose sight of things. They like my videos, they didn't subscribe, and then they forget. So anyway, Gardening at Douentza on YouTube. I also have a Facebook page, Douentza Garden Facebook page, so you can follow that as well. And Instagram, Douentza Garden on Instagram as well. And if you're interested in visiting the garden, you should check out the RHSI website, which has a listing for Douentza and a list of my open days as well. So yeah, that's
So
that's really it. And if you want to buy my book, then Lulu, Lulu, or contact me. That's
yeah,
fine.
brilliant. So if anyone sends you a message on any of those channels, you'll be back to them anyway. And the dates for
Absolutely.
opening dates for next year are on it. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the show notes to the RHSI and to your YouTube channel anyway. So if anyone's listening and they want to just click directly through that, they can do that. Rachel, it's been a really interesting chat. As I said, we probably would. We kind of gone around a good few different topics
Mhm.
in different directions, but it was a really interesting chat. And thank you very, very much for coming on Master My Garden podcast.
Thank you so much, John. And yeah, keep up the great work. It's wonderful to talk to you in person at last.
Yeah,
And yeah,
thank you very much.
thank
So
you. Bye now.
that's been this week's episode. A huge thanks to Rachel for coming on. So really interesting. Her YouTube videos are brilliant. So check those out. Loads of different topics as we mentioned, 1,500 odd videos there now, and you'll see, from the old ones through to the new ones, the kind of progression of the garden and the gardener, I guess, as well. So yeah, really interesting. I wasn't familiar with the book, but it sounds like a great book as well. So check those out. And lots of great tips there, especially for anyone that got orchids as a gift over Christmas. A couple of great tips there to keep them looking well as we go further and further away from Christmas. We don't want to see any of those getting chucked out in the coming weeks. So some great tips there. And yeah, that's pretty much this week's episode. Thanks for listening. Until the next time, happy gardening.